This is a quick video on how you can send emails in React with the React email library and the Resend service. So we can pass a function here that takes from data as an input. We can send that email, right? We will still keep this, and this is async. So we're gonna make this await and async, and we'll deal with the errors later once we are actually sending the email. So now let's actually talk about sending the email. Right, so what we're going to do is we're going to call send email, this function here. Now in here, we actually want to send an email, right? So now we need to use a third party to actually send the email. And the third party that we're going to use is called Resend. And they are actually the same, the founders is the same team as React Email, which is a popular library to make your emails look good, right? This is for styling emails. This is for actually sending emails, right? So let's actually start with just sending it and we'll make it look good later. So we do need an account for this, right? So I have already created an account. If you haven't created an account here, you can create one here. So I'm quickly going to log in. All right, so I have logged in and I see this overview dashboard. Now what we need is we need the API keys. So we're going to install the packages and then we need one of the API keys. Now I've already played around with this a little bit, so I'm going to have some more keys here. I'm going to create a new API key and you can give that a name. I won't give it a name. Full permission, all domains. Okay, I have to actually give it a name. Tutorial. For tutorial. Okay, so I have to copy this key and I'm gonna paste it here for now. Be careful with these keys. I'm showing it on video. I will remove it after recording. This is not typically what you want to have in your code base. Right, so what we're gonna do is I just copied it here. And typically what you want to do with these API keys is you want to put them in an environment variable. So Next.js helps us out here. We can very easily create a file here, .env.local. And here we can say this is going to be for Resend. We can say Resend API key and then the actual value here. So I'm going to copy this, remove it from here, and paste that here. Right. So you don't need quotation marks here in the environment variable file here. Right. Also no spaces necessary. So we can just write it like this. And now this file will not be included when we will push it to GitHub at some point. But if you look at git ignore, you can see that it's going to ignore the .env.local file, right? So this will not be publicly available on GitHub, right? So make sure you put it in an environment variable. It also means that we have to go into Vercel when we host it. We do have to put this in the Vercel hosting platform as well, right? But we'll see how that works. All right, so now we know how to access that API key. Now we need to actually download the Resend package, right? So I'm gonna open a new terminal here. And we're going to say npm install. And Resend actually has been changing some things. So here we need a specific version. So we're all on the same version. So we will say 0.16.0. So I'm going to install this. Okay, so now we have the Resend package. I can close this. Now we need to import it here. So import Resend from not types, just Resend. And then we need to instantiate an object here with this Resend constructor. So what it looks like is we're just gonna say const resend, and it's gonna be an instantiation here. The only thing we have to pass here is that environment variable that we just created. So to access those variables, we can use process.env.resend API key. Make sure you have the exact same name as in your .env.local file. So now we can use this resend variable to send an email. So what we can do here, for example, is we can say resend.emails.send. And then in here we have to pass an object. Where do we want to send it to and from where? So we can say from. Now here we are going to send it from the Resend server or domain, right? So they actually provide like a default domain that we can use to test. Make sure you don't spam because you're gonna get blocked. But they use this resend.dev domain. And we can just use that to send an email to us or to anybody actually, but you don't want to spam because you're going to get blocked. So here we can say, where should it be sent to? So I will use my own email address here. Right? This should be your own email address. And then the subject of the email, we can say subject. We can just say message from contact form. And then what we can do is we can say text, and we will just have some text. Hello world. All right, so here let's just keep it like this. Let's just see if this works. Right, so we have this form. This form is going to invoke this server action send email, which will call this method here from resend to actually send an email. So now let's see if that actually works. So I still have this text here, so I can simply click again. And now let's go to your email, right? If you're using, and I can see, right? If you're using your own email, I can see now that I have received an email. Hello world, right? So of course it's coming from the @resend.dev domain, and you can connect your own domain. It's a bit outside the scope of this project. People can actually fill out a contact form, and it will actually be sent to your email. Right now, of course, we are hard coding hello world here. It should be the message, right? So here, let's actually not log this, but actually assign it to a variable. So we can say the message is going to be form data.get and then the message. Right, so make sure that this message means the name, right? So we've given this text area a name, right? So that's how we access it now. And we also have the sender email, right? So here the recruiter may leave their own email. Actually, they have to because it's required, right? It's this field here. So we can access that here. Sender email form data.get email. Right, so now we don't want to hard code this text here. It should just be whatever the message is. Right, so we can say message. And now we get an issue because here it says form data entry or null. So this message could technically be null according to TypeScript, even though we have specified that it's required. But it's coming from this form data.get method, right? So here we're saying form data entry value or null. So this method has just, that's how it's typed, and TypeScript is just using that. So TypeScript is sometimes not as smart as we think it is. So here we can just check it ourselves, right? So if we have to do some server-side validation as well. So here we can just check, right? So if the message doesn't exist, if it's null, we want to return an error object, let's say. So we'll just return an object with error invalid message, right? So the cool thing is whatever we return here from a server action, we will be able to access that here. So this makes it easier to deal with errors. It's basically like an API route, right? So, but just without actually creating the boilerplate for the API. Okay, so now let's see. Now we know it's not going to be null, right? So now let's see, why is this still not working? So now it says form data entry value is not assignable. So it needs to be a string or undefined. Now, the problem here is that this field of the form could also be like a file. So form data entry value could also be a file, right? We know it's not going to be a file, but technically it's possible. Right, so here we can add some additional validation. So we want to return an error, an object with an error message if it doesn't exist or if it's like a file. Right, so TypeScript at least is smart enough to know that once we check for this, we know after that it's not going to be null. Right, so we just solve the null case. Now we have to solve the situation where it could be a file, type file. So here we're just going to check, is this message of type string? So if we can use in JavaScript, we can say type of message. If that is not a string, then we also want to return this object with an error message, right? And we will deal with the error message in here later, right? But you can see now that TypeScript issue is gone, right? So now once we pass this if block, it's safer now because now we know it's not going to be null. It's not going to be anything else but a string. So it's actually going to be a string. And we actually want to do the same for sender email, but we're not using sender email right now. So where would we use that? Well, we could actually put that here in the message. So we could say something like, the person who sent this message has an email, that's this one. Now what you can also do, because in my message, here it would be nice if you could hit reply and immediately send it to that person, right? So whatever email they put in here, I won't be able to reply and just send the email to them. But now it's not possible because it's going to be sent to this resend domain. But what you can add here is a reply to field. So reply to, and that's going to be that sender email, right? So now we'll see that you can hit reply and it will be actually sending a new email to whatever the email is that the user filled out. All right, so here we're going to get the same issue where form data entry or null. So what it means is reply to needs to be, let's see, type null is not assignable. So this needs to be a type of string or an array of strings or undefined, right? But sender email could potentially be null. We know it's not going to be null because we make it required here. Although technically, people can circumvent that on the client, but it's safe enough here to assume it's not going to be null. All right, now when we do all of this, we know it's going to be the correct format, right? It's not going to be null, etc. But TypeScript doesn't pick that up here. Right, so sometimes TypeScript just doesn't pick it up, and so it still thinks that this could be null. So here we can assert basically that we know better than TypeScript. So we can add as string. We know it's gonna be a string at this point, right? So here for the message as well, we can just add as string, and basically assert here that it's gonna be a string. These two. Right, because we are checking, it's not going to be null, right? Because then we would return false here, and we would return this. We wouldn't even get to here. So we cannot get here if it doesn't exist, if it's null. So we know it's not going to be null. We also know it's going to be a string, because if it's not a string, it would return false, right? And we also know it's going to be within that, it's going to be less than that maximum length. So we can be confident enough to assert that these are going to be strings. All right, so what we're passing now is the text. That's going to be the actual message that we fill out in the form, and also this reply to email. So let's actually double check this. So we'll say test@gmail, and I will say hello world. Actually, let's give it a different text message now. New message. So I will just write this, and now I'm going to click submit, and I'm going to check my email box. All right, now I didn't receive the email, so I waited some time, and this is still the old one, so I didn't receive it. So something went wrong here. Now, if we look here, this actually needs to be awaited. So we need to put await in front of this here. Make sure you also have this marked as async. And then it still won't work. And obviously, it's because this is not the correct name. Right, sender email is the name here. So very silly mistake, sender email should be the name. Right, so it needs to be the exact name here as what you put in the form, right? Name is sender email. Right, so what we had before was just email, but there's no form control here with the name email. Right, there's type email, but not name email, sender email. So this needs to be sender email. Okay, so now all of this should work. I'm gonna close here, close out of here. And now I'm gonna click on submit again, and I'm gonna check my inbox, and now we get message from contact form, blah blah, which is indeed the message, right? If we now click here, you can see reply to is test@gmail.com. So if I now click on reply, it will actually send that email to that email address that the user filled out, right? Now it's also a bit ugly here, this onboarding. And they actually in the API docs, they give you a way to make that look a little bit better. So to include a friendly name, use the format your name and then with angled brackets. So let's do that. Let's try that. So here we can say from, well, this needs to be in angled brackets, the email. And then what we can put here is the more better looking name. So here we can use something like contact form. Let's put it like that. All right, I'm going to save here. And I'm just going to send the same email again to check that, submit. And let's see. I'll get another name. Yeah, so now we see contact form here. So that looks a little bit better, I think. Right, so it's nice. You can read about the docs here. There's other ways to customize things, but we have a pretty simple form. We don't really need a lot of customization there. All right, so now we have this functionality. It works. We can send emails to ourselves, but it doesn't look so nice. Right? It's just very plain now. And typically in professional applications, if you deal with emails, I'm going to close Resend here. If you deal with emails, you want to style them as well. So a very popular library for styling emails is React.email. You can style, this is a more Reacty way basically of styling emails, and it smooths away a lot of issues with styling emails, because you can imagine all these email clients like Gmail and Microsoft email, and there are some other third-party email clients as well. They all have different ways of interpreting the email message, and they may have issues with styling. And this smooths away a lot of those issues. It just makes it much easier to style emails. So here we're gonna, it's actually by the same people as from the Resend service that we just used. Right, so here on the website, they have some examples here. Right, so you probably see these emails as a consumer yourself. You probably have some services that have styled their emails, right? So it makes it very easy to style emails. So the reason we're including that here in our application here, because technically, you know, a simple email may be enough, but you know, if you want to publish your portfolio online and, you know, some tech lead that's looking to hire you wants to see how you've coded this portfolio, well, it would be impressive to show that you are also capable of styling an email. It's not that difficult, but it's just another feature that we can add here to impress the person that's looking to hire us even more. Right, so let's quickly do that. So they actually show you how to do that. So if you look at the source of any of these, they basically give us a bunch of components. Let me actually zoom in here a little bit. They give us a bunch of components like body. It's basically like an HTML file. So body and HTML and head. And we can even use Tailwind. Right, so then you can just create a React component and we can pass that React component here. So instead of passing a text field, so plain text, instead of doing this, I'm going to comment this out. What we're going to do is we can actually just pass React and we can actually give a React component. And Resend will actually interpret that properly. Right, so we're going to create the React component now with React email, and then we pass it here to Resend. Right, so I'm going to comment this out for now. So where are we going to create that email? So email is also something that typically you want to have a separate folder for. So I'm going to create another folder here, last one, email. Right, and in here, if you have a bigger application with multiple types of email, you can give them a unique name. Here we'll say contact form email or contact form. Let's actually call it email. Contact form email.tsx, RFC, contact form email. All right, so we have this. So now we have, and we need to get access to these components that React email gives us. So we need to install the package. So we can say npm install @react email / components and also @react email / tailwind, right? Because we're going to use Tailwind and they even allow that. So we can style with Tailwind. So if you've ever styled, if you ever tried to style emails, you know how much of a hassle that can be. And this is going to be much easier now. Okay, so we've installed this. I can close the terminal again. Now what we want to be able to do, of course, is this email takes in this text here, this message, and we need to output that here somewhere. So this should take in that message and we will call that message and that's just going to be a string. Right, and actually let's do it the way that we've been doing it for React components. So we'll say contact form email props. We'll define the type up here. So type contact form email props message is going to be a string. Okay. All right. So then we can use those components from the React email library. So we need to import them. Let's actually import a bunch of them. So we need the actual HTML component, body, and head as well. Head, heading, HR for like a horizontal line. We will also use container, which will center everything, preview, section, and text. And this is coming from, let's see, doesn't recognize it. So we'll say @react email / components. And then we're also going to use Tailwind, right? So we can style with Tailwind, but we do have to import the Tailwind component here from @react email Tailwind. Okay, so a bit of setup here. Okay, so then what we can do is it's basically going to look very similar to just like an HTML file. So we're going to start off with the HTML here. And then we have a head. We're not going to have anything here. Now the head can hold things like the title for the email, but we are already defining that with subject here. And if you're not sure what some of these components do, they have complete documentation. And they also show you the support for all these email clients. So Outlook from Microsoft, Apple email, Yahoo email, and there are some popular other ones, right? So it's pretty cool that you can now use this and it will make it look good across all of them, right? Much easier than before. All right, so let's see, we'll have head. Now we have that preview as well. This is basically going to be, if we look here for preview, email clients have this concept of preview text. So it's basically just going to be a short snippet of text. And we could use that, but I think we are already doing that here with, right? So we'll just quickly add that here as well. So preview, we can just say new message from your portfolio site. And then we're going to have body. Now we want to wrap everything in the body in the Tailwind component. So we can use the Tailwind classes. So we'll have body. And in the body, we want to center everything. So they have the container component for that. Now they have a way of previewing this, by the way. So we can spin up another server, or they will spin up another server, and it will open up a new tab where you can preview this. But this is going to be quite straightforward. So let's just quickly type this out. Or you can just copy it from the GitHub repo if you don't want to type it out. So this is going to be the section. Now in here, we're going to have the heading for this email. Heading, we can say something like you received the following message from the contact form, and then the actual text of this email, and that should be the actual message. So we're gonna pass the message to this component, and that's what we're gonna output here. And then we also want to have maybe maybe we want to have a line, and maybe we also want to show the sender email here. So this message came from the following email, or the sender's email is the following email. So we can have some text here again. We can say the sender's email is, and then the sender email. Right, it will also be in the reply to field, right? Reply to, but maybe we also want to make it explicit here in the email itself. So it's currently not accepting sender email, so we have to add that here, right? So TypeScript is complaining. So sender email will be a string, and we have to add that here, sender email as well. Okay. So now we have our email component, right? A bit of a boilerplate here. Make sure you export this. Now what we can do is when here, we can import that. We can import this email. So I will say contact form email. It already suggested for me. And now what we can do is we can pass that here as a component. Whoops. I can pass this here as a JSX component. So I can, and then we have to pass that as props, right? So here we can say it needs to get message and sender email. So now we can remove this text field and we can just pass the message, right? That's going to be message is what we have here, message and sender email, right? Message is message, sender email is sender email. All right, that's basically what we can do now, which is pretty cool. Now we get an issue here, obviously. What's the issue? And the issue is here we're using JSX in a normal TypeScript file, or you can also see it as JSX using in a .js file. You'll get the same issue, right? So we've seen this issue before. So the quick fix here is to make this a TSX file. And so if I do this, we are allowed to write JSX in here. And actually, let's see what we get. Now there are some subtle differences, and ideally, if it's not necessary, we do want to keep .ts, right? So we do want to we don't want to have this become a JSX file just because of this little snippet here. So there's an alternative way of writing this, and that's actually what React does behind the scenes, right? We've seen that before. So what we can say is React, and then we can just say React dot create element, right? So instead of writing JSX, which is basically just a synonym for what we're doing here with create element. So what you can write here is react.createElement. Now we need to import React itself here. So here import React from React. Okay, and this is the same as doing this, but here we also have two props, right? So if you want to pass props with create element, you just have an object here as the second argument, and that's going to be a message, right? Message is message that we do this, and here we will just do like this. A sender email is going to be the sender email. So this is equivalent. What we're doing here is equivalent to this, right? So this is the same as this, right? So when you write JSX with section heading and you use these components, behind the scenes, React will convert that to all of these React.create elements, right? So let's remove this. And now let's see what issue we have. So we basically have the same issue as before, which is that TypeScript is not able to figure out that this message will always be a string and not something else. So we can assert here that this will be a string, right? And sender email as well as string, right? So this was a bit of boilerplate code, bit of typing if you code it along. So now let's actually see what we get if we send an email. So let's go back here and we'll say test at Gmail. This is a test. So now I'm going to send this. I'm going to click here and let's see if that works. I'm going to refresh here in my email inbox, and indeed we can see message from contact form, new message from your portfolio site. So that's actually what you see here. So this preview is what you will see here in the email client, new message from your portfolio site. And you can see now that it's structured a little bit differently. It doesn't look great yet because we haven't added our own Tailwind styles. So let's do that now, right? But you can see it's already styled a bit differently. Now we can actually use TypeScript styles. That's the last thing we'll do here. So this body, let's actually give it like a background color. You can style this very similar as in plain HTML or plain, or of course, just React, right? It's just React. We want the, let's see, so just change the background color a little bit, and then we'll give this section also some styling. Class name, we can give that a styling of BG white, and then we want to have that border, right? So we can actually use our basically our utility that we created ourselves, border black. I will add some margin vertically and some padding horizontally and as well as vertically. We're gonna add some border radius, okay, and then you can see this heading. There's quite a bit of line height here, right? So as the text gets bigger, typically you want to reduce the line height. So in Tailwind it's called leading, so we'll call it leading tight. All right, so if we save this now, and now we have to send an email again. So I'm gonna click here on submit again, gonna refresh my email inbox. And now I have another email here. Let's see if this is styled even better. I'm gonna open it here. And now you can see it's styled a little bit differently. Now the text for some reason has become purple. So I do want to change that. And I think it's probably something that the email client adds because it can see that this is a duplicate of before. So it may style it with purple. Now I'm going to override that hopefully by doing this, text black. Okay, so one last time I'm going to submit. And actually maybe we should submit with different text. Another test, blah, blah. Okay, so now I'm going to check, submit, go to my email inbox and get my email here. Let's see what we get. All right, so it's still purple text, and I think it's just because I've been spamming myself, and this is what the email client is doing. We could continue playing around, but I think you get the point here. We can style these emails, and there's probably a way to override that, but it's going to be outside the scope of this project for now. Right, but I think this looks pretty cool, and this is much, much easier than styling emails before.
By the way, if this was helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe. Also, check out my courses on CSS and JavaScript if you want to take those skills to an advanced level. Because in there, we will build some beautiful real-world projects from scratch so you can see how everything fits together and really master CSS or JavaScript. And I will also release other courses soon like React and Node.js. So if you want to be notified, then make sure you are subscribed to the email newsletter. You can find the link in the description. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you soon.